Two paramedics have now been found guilty in the 2019 death of Elijah McClain. If you don't remember this particular case, Elijah McClain was a 23-year-old American black man from Aurora, Colorado, who was killed as a result of being injected with a apparently fatal dose of ketamine by paramedics after being forcibly detained by police. He went into cardiac arrest, and 6 days later, he died in a hospital. When he had been detained by the police, he was simply walking home from a convenience store, which in America is frequently fatal because of the terrible state of America and our law enforcement. So this is the big update. It's taken years, but the paramedics have been found guilty. There's Jeremy Cooper, Peter Cichuniec, I believe, found guilty of criminally negligent homicide. Jurors found Cichuniec guilty of 1 second-degree assault for unlawful administration of drug, and not guilty of an additional second-degree assault charge. Cooper was found not guilty of 2 second-degree assault charges. So they were charged after finding out that they made the decision to administer 500 milligrams of ketamine, the maximum dosage, and they did so after diagnosing him with what they call excited delirium. Now, this is not a term that you're familiar with. You should be, because it's popped up in America quite often. It's a term applied to diagnose suspects who appear to be acutely distressed, hyperactive, or aggressive during police encounters. Excited delirium is what police have used to assert that suspects possess, quote, superhuman strength. And it's been criticized by advocates as racially motivated, unscientific, and a way to get officers off the hook for a death on their watch. Colorado, by the way, has banned cops from using that medical diagnosis starting next year. Good. Unfortunately, too late to save the life of Elijah McClain or others who have been brutalized or killed as a result of this unscientific, knee-jerk diagnosis of effectively saying this person is no longer a human. They are capable of superhuman feats, and thus doesn't that justify anything we do? That is effectively how it's been used. And by the way, as has already been hinted at there, in a racially discriminatory fashion. So there's no national database tracking cases of excited delirium, but in one study, data showed that between 2010 and 2020, there were 166 reported instances where a person died in police custody and excited delirium was described as a possible cause of death. Of those people, black people made up 43% of those deaths, despite making up only 13% of the US population. And the idea that a cop or a paramedic saying that someone is in excited delirium, to the extent that that is what kills the person, certainly seems at the very least suspicious. But in this case, we do have the charges being successful. Francesca, what do you think?
I mean, thank God, that at least there's some more accountability, but it is so sickening. And here's the thing about paramedics is when the cops are beating the crap out of people, when they are illegally detaining them, when they, again, as we've seen time and time again, are escalating the situation and getting a potential suspect into excited delirium, which is basically just endorphins or feeling scared. When people are scared, generally they have a reaction, right? It's hard to stay calm when you're afraid for your life. A lot of times it's the paramedics that come in maybe very late, maybe right on time on the scene, and they're the ones making decisions about whether and how to save this person's life and how to treat them. They're the ones who could stall and wait to administer care. They're the ones who could administer 500 milligrams of ketamine and kill a early 20s, 21-year-old kid.
He was 19 at that time. Yeah.
19-year-old kid.
Yeah.
So the paramedics also are largely responsible for the police brutality and lack of accountability. And I know in other instances they've been heroes, they've helped, but a lot of times, again, that sort of thin blue line, the code of conduct also bleeds into the paramedics as they believe whatever the cops are telling them. So I'm glad there's some sort of accountability.
Yeah, although again, took literally years, and as we covered, of those 166 people who died in this that have been found, obviously there's no national database or anything. Like, I don't know how many might not have.
Yeah,
if there had not been this knee-jerk reaction of, I no longer need to consider this person as a person. I no longer need to carefully consider what I do to control this situation. I have set up a situation wherein almost anything I do will be found to be acceptable by a population that's been raised with, like they're using the term excited delirium now. Like we've shown you in the past, maybe a couple of years ago, we talked about the history of this, and there were headlines in the New York Times back in the 40s, 50s, and 60s of like describing Black men as being like, I think they used the terms like gorilla strength, they did not try even to use quasi scientific language, but it's the exact same thing. This is not a person. And thus, they do not need to be handled like a person. I mean, you see photos of Elijah McClain, the idea that they're treating him as if he is Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde or something is absolutely maddening, giving him way too high a dose of this. And so I'm not even gonna give you any more of the statements from the side that was defensive towards this. I'm gonna give you a statement from Cichuniec McClain, so the mother of Elijah McClain, who released a statement ahead of the verdict saying, "No amount of procedures, practices, protocols, or the lack of training for service jobs will ever replace the human heart. I am sure that if Elijah had been one of their children, family members, friends, or comrades, they would not have been so indifferent to what was happening like they were with my son." 100%. I mean, I think you could just go broader and say generally these sorts of things simply would not be done if the person was white. It doesn't have to be a family member. And then after the verdict, she said that it was a very small acknowledgement for accountability. No, the 3 out of 5 convictions are not justice. The only thing the convictions serve is a very small acknowledgement for accountability in the justice system. My son's murder case is part of a continuum of hatred that is spread throughout the world. And I think we can all understand why you would not feel awesome as a result of this. Nothing brings back your son who was needlessly taken from you. And so Colorado is not gonna allow for, excited delirium as a diagnosis now. Do we not think that they're gonna find something, that the cops aren't gonna push back against this? It is very nice to have a get out of accountability free card.
Well, there's so much more to say.
Let's go to you.
No. I mean, just also my thoughts are like, we've seen this Elijah McClain. I believe he also was like a very quiet person. I don't know if he was neurodivergent. I don't know if he was having like some kind of episode, but we also see just how crass police are when they deal with people. And of course, obviously disproportionately, Black people in this country, but just we've seen other videos, right? Of, people having mental episodes being like, I'm sorry, I'm just scared. I'm sorry. Elijah was very, very cordial to the same people that were, brutalizing him. I'm sorry, I just can't breathe. I'm trying to comply. This kind of stuff that is so gut-wrenching. It is truly the policing system that needs to change, not our behavior. And so I'm glad that Colorado's not gonna have this. California, for example, is gonna do away with the line, "Do you know why I stopped you?" when it comes to traffic stops, which, as it's been told, apparently stats are in, that's an incredibly aggressive line and tends to escalate the entire interaction. You're like, yeah, it's the most passive aggressive line. Do you know why I stopped you? No, stupid, just tell me what's going on so I'm not in the dark and we don't get into an argument. Don't be a weird teacher about it. Just say you were going 70, I'm stopping you. So that kind of stuff, there's so many ways they could de-escalate, but they don't.
Yeah, and the final thing that I want to say about this is I want to, I guess, double down on what Cichuniec McClain said about none of this, these minor regulation changes or stopping, a term from being used, can replace the human heart. I feel like we talked about this literally last week. Like, no one is a human anymore. No one, like we as outsiders, and I understand they're living it every day. So I don't know what it would take. Like, does there need to be mandated evaluations or something? Does there need to be mandated like a week off to just step out of the desensitizing that you experience clearly through your job, the normalization of barbaric behavior and lack of empathy, to just try to get you to once again see people as people? And this is not exclusive to cops, obviously. I think that clearly some paramedics obviously feel that way. I think a lot of politicians could use a little bit of just a reminder that you are supposed to be a part of a society. We are supposed to be people living together, thriving or failing together. And all too often, there just is a complete dehumanization that we see from people who have significant amounts of power. For more political news breakdowns, interviews, stories of activism, and me trying my hardest to care about the occasional big celebrity news story, subscribe to our YouTube channel at youtube.com/thedamagereport. And you can ring the bell wherever it is so you don't miss anything.